Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission on Tuesday, September 24, 2024. This meeting is called to order. Margaret, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Mercado, Commissioner Previtali,
Here.
Commissioner Rodby,
Here.
Commissioner Sade,
Here.
Commissioner Summers, Chair Haveman.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Okay, now to the order of the agenda. First, are there any commissioners who would like to request changes to the order of the agenda? Okay, thank you. All right, next we'll move on to the meeting procedures. The City of San Rafael remains committed for all to participate in our public meetings. I want to welcome all that are making the time this evening to participate. Margaret, would you please tell us how public comment will work this evening?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and streamed live to YouTube. Viewers can also watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda or by dialing 669-444-9171 and entering the meeting ID 840-9897-7308#. We are offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom. Select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable this feature. And if you have any technical difficulties, please email Christina Estillo at thecityofsanrafael.org. To provide oral testimony, speakers must be present. Displayed on the podium is a timer that will help you stay within the allotted time frame. You are invited, though not required, to introduce yourself and to say what part of San Rafael you reside in, or if you live outside of San Rafael. If you'd like to request an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide public comment virtually, please submit your request to the planning manager 72 hours in advance at margaret.kavanagh-lynch@cityofsanrafael so we can get that set up.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Next on the agenda is oral communication from the public. This is for remarks on non-agenda items only. We welcome them at this time, and they may be on anything within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Please know that remarks on agenda items will be heard at the time the item is discussed. And since we have a lot of people here wishing to speak, can I see a show of hands of people who wish to speak on non-agenda items, not in Northgate? Okay, all right. Thank you all. So I see that there are Margaret, I close the public comment period. All right. I see that there are no items under the consent calendar this evening. We have two action items. The first is 5800 Northgate Drive, the Northgate Town Square project. This is a study session for the proposed Northgate Town Square project. Let me take a moment to explain how this item will be discussed this evening. We'll start by receiving a report from staff. Then I'll ask the Planning Commission if they have any questions regarding the report, and these should be only clarifying questions that they need to ask immediately to move forward. Otherwise, I'll ask the commissioners to hold their questions until after the public comment period. Next, we'll receive a presentation from the development team. This will be approximately 20 minutes long, and at its conclusion, I'll again ask the Planning Commission if they have any immediate questions, if they are okay waiting until a bit later. Then we'll open the public comment period. The total number of people who wish to speak will inform the time we are able to offer each person. For example, if we have 20 speakers, each can have 3 minutes. If we have more than 20 but less than 30, it will be 2 minutes per person. And finally, if there are more than 30, we will have to reduce the time to 1.5 minutes per person. A few other rules to know. One speaker cannot cede their time to another speaker. Each person may speak only once. And remember, you don't need to repeat previous comments, but can instead indicate that you agree with the previous speakers. Okay, if I may, could I have a show of hands on how many people intend to comment on this item?
I come up with 19.
Just under 20.
Yes, sir.
So we'll go with 3 minutes per speaker tonight. Okay. Please know that we are following these rules so that we can hear from as many people as possible this evening. Micah, would you please begin the staff presentation?
Great. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Micah Hinkle. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director, and I'm pleased to bring forward this item to you tonight. With us tonight is our Planning Manager, Margaret Kavanaugh Lynch, April Talley, the Project Director, Christina Estudillo, who will be joining us in a moment, and then our Legal Counsel, Nira Doherty. On the Zoom call also is our consultant team, Heather Hines, our Planning Lead, and Teresa Wallace, our CEQA consultant lead from LSA. So adding on to really tonight's, the purpose of this meeting is to provide a comprehensive overview of this project to our community and take public comments and clarification questions from the Planning Commission. This project has gone through many iterations. So really the purpose tonight is to clarify what project are we reviewing. I am excited to actually bring it here tonight at this version. The applicant has made multiple modifications to it to address comments throughout the 3-year process it's been in. And with that, I will turn it over to Heather Hines, our planning consultant. One thing I do want to note, though, we did receive multiple written comments beforehand. Those have been uploaded into the website, and those are available for your review also. A lot of those questions were really CEQA driven, like a lot of technical questions related to air quality, traffic. Those questions will be further addressed when we issue the response to comments as part of the final EIR that'll be held in October. So that's, I just want to clarify that the technical details and go in depth of those will be done at a later date, but I wanted to know that there were a lot of questions received on that end. So with that, I'll turn it to Heather and we can kick it off from there. Heather?
Great. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Let me share. I do have a presentation to bring up. And can somebody there confirm that you're seeing my screen? Okay, I see a
Confirmed.
thumbs
Yes,
up.
yes.
Great, thank you. So good evening. As Micah introduced me, I'm Heather Hines. I am a principal with M Group, a planning consulting firm that works for Bay Area jurisdictions, public jurisdictions, and we're here this evening supporting your in-house staff in reviewing this Northgate Town Square project. As everybody, I'm sure both on the dais as well as in the audience, this is a very large project and has, as Micah mentioned, gone through about 3 years of review so far. So I'm going to be providing a brief presentation, which largely tracks with the staff report that was published for this item last week. And bear with me. Okay. So why are we here tonight? What is the purpose of the study session? So tonight's meeting is to provide a comprehensive review of this final project proposal and the project design. It's an opportunity to provide opportunity for questions about the final proposal, as well as evolution of the project over time, and discuss any outstanding issues if there are any. There is no formal action tonight, so the Planning Commission will not be making a decision, will not be making a formal recommendation. There is no formal staff recommendation as part of this project. So just really want to emphasize that for members of the public, for the commission on the dais, that this is not for a decision tonight. It is really an opportunity to review the final proposal, ask clarifying questions so that when the project is before you for a formal action and recommendation, you've had a chance to get familiar with the project in its final version and ask those questions or clarifications needed. So I already kind of led into this, but what is the Planning Commission's role tonight? The Planning Commission is not being asked to make a decision. So it's providing that opportunity to get familiar with the final project, ability to clarify aspects of the project that maybe you don't quite understand how we got here, or how it is incorporating comments or any of those clarifications. So it's also an opportunity for the Planning Commission to ask questions and clarify the remaining process for this project and the milestones, and ask questions of the applicant about next steps for them if they are to move forward with project approvals from the City Council. So at this time, I'm going to run through a brief overview of the project. As Micah mentioned, the applicant team has also prepared a presentation that will go into additional detail on the evolution of the project since it was originally submitted in 2021, outline their outreach efforts, and the applicants usually have better graphics than staff. So showing you some of their graphics, including a fly-through of the project to give you a really good sense of a greater range of the layout and features of the overall project. To start, I think it's important to remind us what the scope of the project is from in terms of the entitlements. So this project is requesting a zoning amendment to establish PD zoning for the Northgate property. The project is requesting a vesting tentative subdivision map, which would create 6 parcels for residential and mixed use buildings, as well as 18 parcels for the existing commercial and new commercial buildings for the project. The project is requesting a master use permit. This is really a tool to designate the multiple uses on the site, including that mix of residential and commercial, as well as establishing parameters around the privately owned, publicly accessible community space that is an important component of this project. The project also includes an environmental and design review permit, which is the approval of the overall site plan, the building architecture, the landscaping, the site improvements. So overall, the whole Northgate project, including both phase 1 and phase 2. And then as part of that environmental and design review permit and the master use permit also includes the evaluation of the request for a state density bonus. And this is a request that the applicant has made consistent with state law and based on the provision of on-site low-income units, and is requested concession and waiver to the city's maximum height standards for this property. And then finally, the project includes a request for approval of a master sign program. And so this is really establishing uniform sign standards for the overall project that will be approved as a program, and then individual tenants would come in and get sign permits to install signs consistent with that program. There are 2 things that once this project does go to City Council will also be included in the entitlement package, and that's a master affordable housing agreement and a public access use and maintenance agreement. So those are 2 things that will not come before the Planning Commission, but will be part of the packet when it goes to City Council. So as we are all aware, an environmental impact report is being prepared for the Northgate Town Square project, consistent with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act. To date, there have been a number of milestones associated with that analysis, as shown on this slide. The city is currently finishing the final EIR in collaboration with the city's EIR consultant, LSA. And we are targeting a public release of that document on October 14th. Subsequent milestones associated with the environmental review includes the Planning Commission's recommendation on certification of the EIR, which is currently targeted for October 29th, along with the project entitlements. And then ultimately, City Council consideration of certification of the EIR which is targeted for November 16th. These are targets subject to change, but that is where we're tracking and what we're looking forward towards. All future hearings associated with the project will be separately noticed. So it's been mentioned at least a few times already and will continue to be noted that this project has been under review with the city since 2021, early 2021. So this graphic really shows just the evolution of the project from different hearings that have been held for feedback, as well as resubmittals from the applicant, as well as the environmental review process so far. So as you can see, there have been multiple steps taken, including 7 previous hearings with the Planning Commission and or Design Review Board. And really those are what has been a driving factor in the revised project that is now being discussed as part of this study session this evening. So the most recent Design Review Board hearing on this project was in September of 2023. And then the Planning Commission meeting on the draft environmental impact report, which was held in February of 2024. In response to the Design Review Board feedback and public comments, the applicant submitted a revised project proposal in June of 2024. And the revised plans represent that final proposed project. It's the focus of the staff report that was published, and it's also the focus of this study session. These are the plans that the Planning Commission will consider when the final recommendation for entitlements is brought back before the Planning Commission in October and for consideration by the City Council subsequent to that recommendation. So when the Design Review Board reviewed the project in September of last year, the Design Review Board acknowledged that there had been changes to the project that had been made in response to their previous comments. And they made provided additional feedback that really fell into some general themes. So including comments on the overall architecture, comments about the massing and the general size of the overall project, comments about visual interest on the buildings, particularly at the pedestrian level. And there was a series of suggestions to look at or consider refinements to architectural detailing to bring that kind of massing and the scale of the project down to the pedestrian level. Suggestions to ensure that there's adequate shade options, awnings, other features to make the overall project usable and enjoyable for members of the public. The cinema building received some very specific feedback from the Design Review Board. East elevation and a mountain motif that was part of the architecture. The Design Review Board suggested reconsidering that and finding other ways to articulate that side along the east. And then also comments about new ways to break up the rear facade of the cinema building, given the proximity and the relationship to front entries to some of the townhome units as part of residential 3. There were also comments about landscaping, including using shade trees to really maximize shade, going also as part of the suggestions around shade structures and awnings. And then ensuring that the level of detailing on the landscape plan versus the renderings were really matching up. The Design Review Board suggested utilizing permeable paving. And then the other theme of their comments really focused on the town square. The Design Review Board, as the Planning Commission had previously requested, and as many members of the public had requested, provided feedback about making the town square larger, eliminating the use of faux materials such as synthetic turf or faux rocks or logs. There was a suggestion to look at eliminating the dog park because of potential conflicts with other users as part of the town square, and eliminating the rocks that were part of the grassy area to allow more flexibility. So that kind of provides an overview of the themes of some of the design review board comments, and those were responded to as part of that revised project submittal in June of 2024. And the Planning Commission staff report has some exhibits that are the applicant's responses to specifically to those comments on a much higher level of detail. The revised project, so this is what came in June. This is the final project proposal. I'm now really going to focus on a general overview of what the revised project includes. It does include an increase in the size and enhancement of the amenities as part of the town square. One of the more significant changes as part of the revised project was on the residential one, which took the 96 unit affordable housing apartment building and instead replaced that with 38 three-story townhomes to match really the 100 townhomes that had been proposed on residential 2. And as part of that approach, it really changed the project's approach to the affordable housing as part of the entire project. So instead of having all of the inclusionary housing requirement for phase 1 of the project on residential 1 in a single building, the inclusionary housing is now dispersed across all 6 of the residential parcels, with 10% of each of the residential parcels being inclusionary housing at the low income for low income families. In response also to that, because the 38 townhomes was a decrease from the 96 apartments on residential 1, that delta of units actually were incorporated into residential 5. So while residential 1 got smaller in terms of units and residential 5 got larger in terms of unit, the total unit count for the overall project remained at 1,422 units. There are also some architectural changes to the cinema building that I'll detail a bit later on. Architectural refinements throughout the project to add that articulation and pedestrian level interest as suggested by the design review board. Another aspect of the revised project was the applicant withdrew their application for a development agreement. So this project no longer includes a development agreement as one of the entitlements. And then finally, the revised project submittal included a detailed master sign program application. So the resulting project remains in 2 phases. Phase 1 being the 2025 master plan and phase 2 being the 2040 vision plan. The revisions, while there's been refinements and shifts and changes, it has not substantially changed the overall components of the project. It remains at 1,422 residential units and a total at the end of phase 2, there would be 219,380 square feet of commercial space, which is just 2,000 square feet difference than the project, the previous version of the project. So demolition obviously plays a big role in this. We do have a full built-out mall at the moment, and so much of the phasing has to do with existing tenants, some of the obligations the applicant has with existing tenants. So this overall demolition plan is showing what is proposed both for phase 1 and phase 2. The blue showing those aspects of the existing mall that would remain, the red showing what would be demolished as part of phase 1, and the yellow being what would be demolished as part of phase 2. It shows the overall use and programming for phase 1. So it's showing the different shops that are popping up as part of phase 1, including the 2 pads out on Las Gallinas Avenue, as well as some of the interior shops at the interior of the site and the town square at the center of the site. In terms of the residential 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all part of the first phase of the project. Circulation around and through the site has been a significant component of this project, and the applicant has shifted this around a lot after communication with some of key stakeholders to make sure that the right types of access at the right locations were incorporated. So you'll see all the different colored lines, including different types of bike lanes, pedestrian paths, shared pathways that run through the site and around the site, and also a future connection to the Marydale path to this smart station. Associated with the bike and ped facilities, bike parking, vehicular parking is another component that was looked at closely as part of this to ensure that there is adequate bike parking, both long-term and short-term, both for residents and for commercial users. The vehicular parking includes electrical vehicle chargers, electrical vehicle ready spaces, as well as ADA spaces, compact spaces. So this is a graphic that really shows those features as part of phase 1 of the project. And then this also part of phase 1, this is showing the green spaces that have been incorporated into the project as part of phase 1. Again, really emphasizing that town square and the bike hub are both part of phase 1. Originally, that was not part of phase 1, and that has been part of the evolution of this project, as well as an entry plaza and some kind of corner monument rest stops with some benches and features at key entry or gateways into the project, as well as landscape setbacks and landscaping in the parking lots. In addition to the common open spaces in the overall project that would be accessible to the public, each of the residential parcels also have private open space that is part of their project proposal. So each of the residential parcels, whether it's private balconies or patios or common roof decks or pool decks, have been incorporated. So there's both the publicly accessible spaces as well as the spaces that are specifically to the residential tenants. So similarly for phase 2, this is showing the evolution of the overall uses and programming, most notably residential 6 and residential 5 coming online as part of phase 2, as well as the pad 3 and pad 4 out along the frontage. And with that, there are some changes to the internal circulation on the site. Specifically, when Macy's were to go away, then residential 5 would be constructed and an additional throughway through that area of the site, and making sure that we continue to pull through pedestrian walkways and bike lanes and that connectivity as the overall site may change as part of phase 2. And similarly, continuing to provide the bike facilities, the vehicular parking, the electrical vehicle infrastructure as the project evolves as part of phase 2. Not a lot of change in the common publicly accessible spaces as part of phase 2, other than around residential 5 and a residential 6. And similarly, both residential 5 and residential 6 also have the private spaces for the new residential units. So I want to touch on a few specifics with the revised project. The town square obviously has been an aspect of this project that has received a lot of public input and gone through revisions as part of this final proposal from the applicant. So town square did grow to 56,975 square feet. So that is an increase in size. Basically, the town square grew to incorporate a row of parking to the west of the pavilion seating there. So that's the direction it grew. It did maintain the adjacent bike hub in front of the cinema, as well as the retractable bollards that will allow that one segment of internal throughway to be closed down to vehicular traffic to join the bike hub in the town square and allow for farmers market or other temporary activity in that area. The dog park remains as part of the town square, but was moved to that new area, separate area, to provide a greater separation from the play area and to avoid conflicts between the different users. That enhanced play area that's at the bottom right of the town square on your screen, and then also eliminated the synthetic turf and removed not the bollards, but the boulders from the grassy area to allow more flexibility to use that grass lawn in the town square. Residential parcel 1 is another thing that we noted was a pretty substantial change as part of the revised project. This is looking at the original is the top picture that shows the single multi-story apartment building that had 96 units in it, and the bottom showing the revised project, which are the 38 for sale 3-story townhomes. And those townhomes really are of the same design and layout of the 100 townhomes in residential 2. And as I previously mentioned, this really shifted the whole approach to inclusionary housing as part of this project, so that the required 10% of below market rate units are dispersed onto each of the residential parcels to match the market rate units on each of the parcels. But overall, even though this is a change, it does maintain the overall 1,422 residential units as part of both phase 1 and phase 2. Residential 5 also had some changes as a result to residential 1, as previously mentioned. So this is a rendering of parcel 5 as revised, and residential 5, the top being the previous, the bottom being the revised, and really the biggest difference is that change in height. In order to incorporate the 58 units, that delta from the change in residential 1, the massing of residential 5 increased to 6 stories. There were some other changes to residential 5, most notably, there were some comments about the private common space in residential 5, which was on the ground floor, and concerns about shadows and not creating a very enjoyable space for tenants. So some changes to move that up onto the roof, similar to the other multifamily residential parcels. Cinema building is another one that there were a number of comments from the design review board, and there was more significant change as part of the revised project that was submitted. So you'll see on the east elevation, the top two pictures, the first being what was the previous proposal, and you'll see that mountain motif that was commented on from the design review board, and that has been removed, and the applicant has designed in a trellis feature along the walkway along that east elevation of the building. And then south elevation, this faces front stoops of townhomes as part of residential 2. And so to break up some of that massing, the applicant has done a couple of things. One, the cinema has designed in their floor plan party room spaces at this back area, and so they were able to incorporate larger windows to break up that massing, sunshades, and then in both along the east elevation and south elevation, there has been a more robust landscaping plan to help break that up as well. Some of the other things that much greater detail in the staff report, but that I just wanted to point out that the level of detail in the packet that will be coming back before the Planning Commission includes things like fencing, the different types of fencing used throughout the project, whether that be for residential, for the dog park area in the town square, or to provide separation for outdoor dining areas as part of the commercial. So there's a variety of fencing types that are used, and both a legend and some graphic representation of those different uses as part of the project plan set. Similarly, signage. So the project has a sign program that includes a cohesive approach to signage, both to identify the different tenants as well as create some wayfinding within the site. So the stone base, the few larger 25-foot tall signs at key gateways to the project, and then smaller monument signs and flags on light posts, and a whole variety of things to provide that cohesion and design. Residential architecture, we really touched on residential 5 and residential 1 as part of this brief overview, but there have been shifts to residential architecture throughout, mostly to respond to the design review board's feedback, to bring more articulation and focus at the ground level, use of materials and colors, changing from flat roof to gable roof, a lot of little subtleties throughout, and those are detailed in the plan set as well as exhibits to the staff report prepared by the applicant that goes through each building and calls out those changes. Also, the shop and pad buildings, similarly, refinements and changes to those, also to respond to comments, some changes in front of to incorporate ounces and some greater outdoor area as part of that tenant space, as well as some more detail around the pads along the frontage. So there's mention in the staff report, there is a number of different adopted plans and codes that are being looked at as part of the full evaluation of the project. When the project does come back before the Planning Commission for recommendation on the entitlements, that will include a full overview of the required findings and consistency with all of those applicable standards. So as I wrap up, just want to remind that the recommendation tonight is to review the final project proposal, discuss and clarify any issues or concerns if there are any, confirm any outstanding questions you might have about the CEQA process, which will also be part of your packet for recommendation when we come back before you, hopefully on October 29th, and remind you that there is no action before the Planning Commission this evening. And a reminder, next steps, we're looking to publish the final EIR October 14th, back before the Planning Commission for entitlement hearing October 29th, and City Council entitlement hearing on October 29th, or on November 19th, sorry, November 19th. And all those dates are tentative, but we are tracking to all of those dates at the moment. So that concludes my presentation, and I know that the applicant has a detailed presentation as well to take you through additional graphics.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. That was very helpful. Commissioners, do you have any immediate questions, or can you hold them until after the public comment period? Okay, I think we're good. Then next up is the development team. I think we're ready for your presentation.
Good evening. My name is Dave Geiser. I'm the Managing Director of Design and Construction for Malone Geyer Partners. I've got an office here in San Francisco and San Diego, and I've been with the organization for over 25 years in this role. I've got a brief presentation for you tonight. It will articulate what and emphasize what Heather has already said. Margaret, if you have that keyed up. I will also note while she's pulling that up, our entire consultant team is here tonight to answer any questions. While I will give the overview, as Heather indicated, this is a complex project. There's a lot of moving parts, and especially over the last 3.5 years, a lot of changes have been made and a lot of intricacies. I don't have all the answers, so I might have to rely on their expertise to help me through any technical questions or specific questions you have. But I think I've got the big picture handle. So start the slideshow. There you go. Excellent. Next slide. I don't have a pointer, so we'll go with this. Community outreach. As Heather mentioned, we've submitted our original application in March of 2021. Since that time, we've been out in the community with many meetings with the community groups, not only the 6 or 7 DRB and Planning Commission hearings we've had to date. I think there's 6 or 7 of those. We can't see the bottom of the screen, but and most recently we had a community outreach meeting at the mall at the end of August to actually walk the public through our revised and updated project, as Heather indicated, that was submitted in June of 2024. Again, going through the different meetings, the different groups that we've been in front of and talked to. We went through the pandemic with Zoom on a lot of these, out in the public, meeting people in the public, getting input. I think the important point I want to make here is that not just checking the box of meeting the different groups, but listening, talking about the changes, talking about what we could do and what we couldn't do, and making the promise that we would change what we could to make a better project. We feel very comfortable standing here today that we have listened to the community. We've made the change that we could for a better project. But I think that's what this slide really is intended for. Next slide. Talked about, and Heather mentioned too, the existing mall, the buildings that are staying in blue, the buildings that are going away in salmon, and the phase 2 buildings that are leaving in yellow. What this shows is that there's a different phase of the projects. We talk about a phase 2, a phase 1, and a phase 2. There's probably about 20 different phases the project's going to go through in terms of when tenants get relocated, when they get moved, and those conversations with many of those tenants are still ongoing. So when questions of schedule come up, that's up in the air right now. A lot of these tenants, given the time of the entitlement process, is that, hey, when you're entitled, come back and talk to us. Then we can sit down and talk about real schedules and real timing. So those are ongoing discussions, but we need to cross that threshold in terms of being entitled and actually having a project in our hand to go back before they'll commit serious dollars and time and effort into their relocations as well. Next slide. So here's our new phase 1, excuse me, this is our original phase 1 project when we came originally in 2021, where we had the EAH up in the upper corner. We had our town center, a much smaller town center in phase 2 of the project. We still had a big major 3 building that was taking advantage of parking in front of them. But let's go to the changes. The first change, first slide. And one more. So that they should pop in. All right. So residential 2 removed from in the original project, we had about 300 multifamily units at 5 stories sitting on parcel 2. And talking with the different groups, there was a huge desire to reduce the density of the projects on the southern side of the site to be more compatible with the single family residential. We did that. We changed that to 3-story townhomes. And I also will point out at this point, they were also for rent. The for sale came later, which it is now, but it was originally for rent. We took the original units that we lost in the phase 2 or in the parcel 2 and pushed them over to the phase 2 parcel 5 building. We'll see some pictures of. Next slide. So see down below. So residential 3 increased in height, but towards the back of this was originally a 5-story building as well. So what we did is we tiered this building. So against Northgate Drive and towards the senior apartments across the street, it's 3 stories. It steps to 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. So it's a tiered approach. So to really step back from Northgate Drive, the number of units actually increased by a little bit, but the impact on the neighborhood decreased. Next slide. So residential 4 also increased in height. This is where we introduced the density bonus to increase the height of the buildings. And this also increased in height to accommodate, again, some of the units that we were losing in the multifamily in residential 2. The major 3 was removed. So also, it came up here, just jumped a little bit. So we introduced the town center, the town square into phase 1. When we did that, we lost the parking that was in front of major 3. So you'll see that major that was under residential 4 is now changed to shops, our library relocation, and a community room. So the community room and library relocating under parcel 4 from the mall in this location. But the park and I will also emphasize that the park here, when originally moved, was smaller. This was the size of the park that it ended up at, which is about 46,000 square feet. It originally started around 25,000, went around 30, went to 45, but this was at this phase. Next slide. So now we're going to 2022 and the changes that were made in the next. And by the way, these are just representative times over the years. There's multiple changes along the way too. Next. So first, the affordable housing was removed. We were having, and as you're probably well aware, there was an issue of trying to get the program that EAH was providing, that they provided to build their affordable units, to mesh with the city's affordable housing program in terms of being the exact same size of units, the exact same amenities. EAH just didn't provide that. They provided a different program, and we have a hard time matching that up. So in order to get past that, we simply said, hey, we're going to comply by the letter of the city's affordable housing. We're going to do 10% inclusionary in all of the phases of all of the residential, 10% across the board. And then we modified then that parcel 1 to go to 38 townhomes. And those are now for sale. So let me be completely clear. The townhomes are for sale product now, not for rent, and they will include 10% affordable units within that for sale product. And same then 10% in parcels 3 and 4 here in phase 1. And then the additional units, the units that we lost between the 96 and the 38, those units moved to phase 2 in our final plan. So we added another floor to parcel 5, or a partial plan. Next slide, or next advance. So the other big change here, in working with the Bike Coalition and WTB-TAM, there was a need for their strong desire for more connectability with a multimodal trail, and to try to pick up the kids and the people that are living in the units on the south side of the project and be able to connect them via multimodal trail to Smart Train. And also in reverse to get them to the street that connects over to the school. So what we did, we worked with the city to actually to take a lane out of Northgate Drive on the south side of the site and actually expand the multimodal path all the way along the south edge of the site. In addition to this, we, again, at the suggestion of the Bike Coalition, we had bike lanes on the streets. and said, no, narrow, let's slow down the traffic, let's narrow the lanes, and let's do a shared path up above the curb. So we have 11-foot shared path for peds and bikes throughout the southern edge of the site, the residential, and narrowed the streets and took all the parking off the street and made sure there's enough parking within the developments. So we have no more on-street parking that confuses the bike riders and pedestrians in terms of crossing. It slows cars down and it creates that shared path. That was a major change of how we, and that the reason it was a major change is because we had to change all of our civil plans and how everything drained and how everything worked, et cetera. More information than you need to know. Next. And and then lastly, the large change here. We heard you at our last planning commission, want the park bigger. And we heard from DRB as well, want the park bigger. And so the question is how we could accommodate that and sacrifice the retail. And I won the fight with our leasing group that didn't want to give up the parking for that said, hey, if we want the project approved, we got to have a bigger park. So we added 9,000 square feet to the park. It's what we took out about 70 parking stalls along the west side of the park and expanded the park that way. We also have relocated ounces now to the space that's in the area created surrounded by Kohl's and the shops there. We'll see an enlargement of that. But we've left in place the bike hub at its square footage, but now the park is, or the town square is over 56,000 square feet. And I'll show you some slides showing how that happened as well. So those, is there one more? Click forward. One more? No. So those represent the major changes that we've had since you've seen it last and since DRB's seen it last, since September of last year. Those represent the big moves. As Heather indicated, there's a ton of smaller moves for building architecture materials that we've spent hours with planning staff going over, and our consultant team incorporating all of DRB's recommendations from last fall into the plan and making modification to almost every building facade to incorporate their comments and trying to enhance that pedestrian experience. A lot of changes made down low, but some up high that I'll show you in a second. This here was simply to show the street section on the top is Northgate Drive and how we took a lane out of Northgate Drive closest to the project to to add the multimodal path that's there. That will be constructed by us, but with the city's approval to make that change to the roadway. And then the slide below is simply a section of the street that goes between the townhomes and also with the parcel 3 there that shows that shared path now. There's no parking on the street, and that shared path is now provided for easier pedestrian and bicycle in the neighborhoods. The professional bikers are still going to ride in the street, but it gives a place for the kids to ride. Next slide. All right, so this is our 2025 rendering that shows now the townhomes on parcel 1, closest to you, bottom left, the townhomes that have always been there in parcel 2. We'll go through some of the other elevations for the plan, but it gives you a sense of how this project is stepping down to the south. Next slide. We came to the DRB and discussed with them at length kind of the architectural program that we were proposing for the site. And we were trying to zero in on iconic imagery and architecture in San Rafael from the Eichler residential units across the street. We have some agrarian and industrial type buildings that are in town, some in the Canal District, but also elsewhere. There's hospitality, there's office uses, a lot of use of the masonry and the red brick. And so we're leaning, hopefully you start to see once we show this, you see in the architecture of the design of the project that we use these different vocabularies of the architecture to create these districts to evoke a project. Not that it will be built over time, but not the time obviously your downtown is, but to give the idea that hey, here's a project that could have been a rehabbed industrial building, or it looks like hospitality, it looks like a downtown office building, to try to create that sense of a town center and a mixed use project by creating these different districts. Next slide. So let's start with, I'm going to quickly go through some slides here, some renderings. Heather's been through most of it. I just want to point out a few other things and maybe try to make some images bigger to see those points. Next slide, parcel 1. So parcel 1, as we said, it's the same Eichler-esque design that we see in parcel 2. We heard everyone liked the design for parcel 2 and the townhomes there. We simply replicated that design for parcel 1 so that they would blend. There are, by the way, they're not just all the same. Next slide. We see that there are different materials, different colors. There's balcony at different elevations. They're not all matchy-matchies. You march down the row. The idea is to create next slide, to create a different feel for each one. What we did is we turned the townhomes so that the entrance doors face the street. The idea is eyes on the street, make it feel like a neighborhood, not that they're all turning their backs. So all along Northgate Drive and all along these interior streets, the front doors face the street. Eyes on the street, safer, it feels better, feels more like a neighborhood as you're walking through. You say hi to your neighbor as you're sitting in your front porch. Next slide. That's phase two. Next slide. Just showing the different, yeah, so sorry, next slide. Parcel two, again, variety of shapes. We're using different wood patterns. We're using different, basically a lot of different wood product, a block at the ground floor, low slung roofs, Eichler inspired design. Next slide. And here we see, this is the view down. The theater's on the left, the townhomes are on the right. We see parcel three in the distance. We've really juiced up the landscaping on there. You see the wider shared path on the right, if you could see a little closer. But again, Heather mentioned the added windows back there. The cinema's proposing to do more community rooms like birthday party rooms and those kind of things, party rooms to go with the movie. And so they're having, and since that faces south, large awnings, large windows, all facing south to help activate that elevation. Next slide. And now we see parcel two next to parcel three here. Again, the townhome design, doors facing the streets. Next slide. Parcel three, which is at the corner of Northgate and Los Ranchitos. Next slide. So here's that stepping that we were talking about. So we have 3 stories facing a Northgate Drive with a multimodal path here. The entrance, one of our major lobbies and entrances and activated corners is here. We worked with staff on what we could do to orient front doors on both this side and the other side facing the dog park so that people have plenty of access points to the buildings. But here's the stepping from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 on this building. An activated corner. Next slide. This is an interior view. Still on Northgate Drive, looking back at parcel 3. Spent time with staff here on coloration and materiality to try to break the massing of these buildings up. One of the things you might see going building to building is that instead of having a industrial monolithic type look, the idea is to break up the massing of these buildings so that they seem like almost individual buildings that you might find on a downtown street or in a somewhere else where it's not just the one building. Oh, it looks like a series of buildings using different materials, different setbacks, different setbacks with windows and balconies. Next slide. And we'll see that throughout, like it is here. On this corner, interior, is where we're adding an entrance to the building to open, so people, when they want to walk to the park, they had an entrance into their building. And then we actually brought the trellis up another level to create some more identity on the corner, a sense of entry. A lot of the colors and materials have changed to break up, again, the massing of the building as it marches around, change of materials, change of roof height. You'll see along the cornice, there's a step back. It's not just a monolithic cornice that runs around. Working with staff to make those changes. Next slide. Now look at parcel 4, which is where the home goods sits today. Next slide. Spent a lot of time in this corner. We worked with the design review board who want us to introduce more gables and different materials. The white you see is actually a vertical metal panel as opposed to a stucco or simply a plain cement board or something like that to create more shadows and interest in patterns. But again, changing the material. This is actually a lighter colored masonry on the corner with the gabled end and the large balconies. Next slide. And this is along the street. We worked here to break up the verticality where we have a break at the 3rd level with the step back of balconies, the added trellis, change of material in colors, step backs, change of the cornice mold across the street, introduction of gables at the other end of the building to add more visual interest to that corner, all at the recommendation of DRB and working with staff. Next slide. This is the corner at Marydale entering into the parcel 4, and we see this, the existing driveway into the site. Next slide. And we've introduced a bike cafe. So all the bike lockers for this building are located at this northeast corner of the building that's located on the multimodal path that comes into the site. The idea is that you've got a place to land, to get your bike out, to go riding. There's fix-it stations. There's place for waters and the place, and there's actually a patio and extra seating area for people to hang out here on this corner. Next slide. And you see the brick too. So let's talk about the town square quickly here. Heather went through most of the changes. What we have here is we never had faux stones. We never had faux, there were real rocks and they were real trees, but we pulled them out but there was artificial turf. It's natural turf now without the real stones to create more flexibility in that large space. And then we've actually mirrored over to the other side of the pavilion, more lawn. We've taken the dog park that was concerned about proximity to the children's play area. So now the children's play area got larger with more traditional play equipment in it. The dog park's moved to the other side. We can now utilize the park for small events and large events with both sides of the pavilion, offering a large turf area to both sides. We still have the elements of the park that we had before, which were these covered quiet areas around the grass where people go sit and hang out. We've the bike hub is still as it was originally designed and of its size. There's still the ballers that come up to allow it to close off the area between the theater and the main park with whether it be a farmer's market or an art show or whatever it is, we can close those off to allow the bike hub area to connect with the park with this additional area that's gated off to cars. I will point out we've created a home for ounces up next to Kohl's there, so you will see a rendering of that. But basically, we've taken their program where they are today that sits on the other side of the street, and we've pushed them over into there with all their same amenities that they have. Next slide. And we see that here. So we see the pavilion still exists. We have the children's play area in front of you, the large green area out here in front of the stage that's programmable for any set of uses out there. Throw the ball around, kick a soccer ball. It's quite large. Next slide. And then we see the farmer's market that's in front of the bike hub area that's remained largely unchanged from before, the same size. We've kept the amenity largely intact. We didn't see any reason to change it. Next slide. And so now we're going to walk around some of the buildings around the park as well. We have this parcel 3. There's a new building that sits in front of the theater. Once we tear them all down, we'll have the opportunity to build the shop. When we see that as whether it's fast casual food or shop space or just a typical shop you'd find, that's residing next to a theater. We see the articulated pattern in the paving here and we've kept this. We've added this at one point throughout the town square to give people a sense that they're in a different place here. We're slowing traffic down by giving the different pattern that they're driving over. And the intent, again, is to get people to drive slower in an area they recognize it's more pedestrians in. And we also see the parking structure that we're adding. We're doing a lot of work around the facade remodel, but we're adding at the corner elevators and stairs to get down from the second floor now that we have to fully utilize that parking structure since we've got less parking in the town square area. Next slide. This is the ounces that we talked about. You saw it in Heather's slide, but relocating them and their operation over to the space that will be created when we relocate the road. The huge oak tree that's been planted there some time stays. Next slide. And here we see Shops 2A, which is also facing the park. There's been no change to this building except for the added addition of some awnings for shading. That was a recommendation, I believe, of this group on that building. Next slide. And here we see the dog park. So this is the new addition. This is the new side of the park that's been added, the dog park that we're going to see relocated to this area. There is a fencing plan. Someone was asking about fencing, and there is now a fencing plan in our package that goes through in great detail what fence is located where on the entire property. So if you're interested in that, we can look that up. Next slide. And this is the restaurant pad that we have out on the corner of Las Colinas and Northgate Drive. This is somewhat of a placeholder. We're talking to some national restaurant tenants. They may want to make some changes that we'd have to come back to city to talk about, but this is the quality design we expect to see for those buildings. Next slide. Talk about sustainability. This hasn't changed. Actually, I take that back. It has changed because every time Cal Green changes, we have to change our requirements. As Cal Green gets more and more strict, when we started the project, we were under a different Cal Green requirement. Now that it's been updated, they've gotten more stringent. And the way our project's set up, as you well know, when we don't set in stone the Cal Green requirements until we go to pull a building permit. So we anticipate that the future phase of this project, as well as phase 2, will be much more stringent in their Cal Green requirements than they are today. Happy to talk about all the different things, but we're still all electric on the residential. We're dual plumbing. We're purple pipe on the landscape. So all the same sustainable items that were there before. The only thing I would say is that we've committed to the tier 2 EV charging stations for all of the retail parking. And that's been an update. Next slide. Phase 2. So this was, so now where we started with phase 2, go ahead and next slide and we'll have these pop in here. So sorry, this is a rendering. This is a rendering now that's showing the phase 5 residential built in the place of Macy's, the residential 6 building you see, and the addition of some pads along Las Colinas, which is really the change for phase 2. Next slide. And here it is, another view from the north side of the site, from Las Colinas here, looking towards the Rite Aid in the foreground. You'll see see parcel 5 in the foreground. Heather mentioned some changes that we made. The amenity area was kind of in a canyon and dark. When we modified that program to add the units to the west side, we brought the amenity deck up to the rooftop. So now all of the multifamily have rooftop amenity decks. Next slide. Phase 2, we'll talk about some buildings here as we go around. Next slide. So phase 5, again, rooftop amenity area, but what I want to talk to is next. So here's the entrance off of Marydale Drive. Now the phase 1 is already in place, so we see the phase 2 with the parcel 5 on the right, and in the distance I see parcel 6 on Marydale. Next slide. And that's what that corner looks like. So again, we've got rooftop amenity decks on this corner. It faces south. It's a great place to see activity on the corner. And again, we've worked with staff. We've broken up some of the elevations. We've changed the roof lines coming around. Again, really breaking up the massing of these buildings. Next slide. This is the corner from inside. If I'm standing in the town square looking towards the old Macy's site, I see the parcel 5. Again, we're looking to evoke a sense of a downtown building with this is actually painted masonry here that we're evoking a look of something it's evolved over time. The building next to it is in wood, the building next to it in plaster. It's the same building, but they're broken up in terms of massing. We've done a lot of work with staff in terms of what the articulation on the ground floor, make a better pedestrian experience there. And those are all in the details in the report. Next slide. This is a view from the north side of the site. We see the ground floor retail under parcel 5. We see the relocation of major 2 and the new connection that's created by removing the Macy's that comes from the north side of the site now in between Macy's and the mall, the former mall, that gets you to the town center site. This is increasing the circulation. Next slide. And the ground floor along that street that I was just talking about, locating our lobbies and fitness areas, all those things to activate the ground floor along those. And again, those are all conversations we've had with staff to make an activated ground plane, enhance the pedestrian experience. Next slide. Parcel 6. Next slide. So our premier corner, we've done a lot of work on this building. It's actually one of my favorite buildings. It's echoing some of the hospitality type design. We've added the trellis on above the retail. So there's retail on the ground floor here facing the park. And then there's residential decks out on top of that we've now added this trellis feature to help break up the massing here. We still have the strong corner element. The retail building, major 1, is around the corner facing north, still where the Kohl's entrance is now. And then the leasing entrance is over here on the facing the park and activating the ground floor plane there. Next slide. This is the southeast corner of that building, the leasing office. We've done work here to bring down some of the material from the top to actually change the planes of what's happening on the ground floor to break up the top plane. Again, a lot of push and pull what's happening at the upper levels and in between to break up the massing of the building. And by the way, if you're noticing the materials here, these aren't just flat plaster buildings here. These are really articulated, high quality materials, and a lot of it, and a lot of change of materials to really create a higher end look to these buildings, which I hope is coming through because it's far and above some of the other stuff that's out there in terms of multifamily. Next slide. And that is it. It says thank you down there. You can't see it because it says that. I will also add that, and one of the major changes, and sorry I didn't have a better slide of that, on the back side of that last building, we really spent a lot of time on the articulation of the garage screening that's happening around that backside facing Northgate Drive. Before it was pretty plain. We've made those actually more of a storefront type design with that screening there. So I wanted to point that out. So Here's the tricky part. I had a video teed up that we were going to play. Unfortunately, it doesn't play very well through Zoom, and it's really super choppy. What I prefer to do, I can play it, but no one's going to be happy with me. What I'd rather do is just we'll put that link up on our website, and I've given a copy to Margaret to put on the city's website. We'll let people click in and view it through the city's website and ours, and we'll figure out the technology for our next meeting so I can play it then. But it basically just stitches together all these images you've seen in kind of a fly through the town center. You'll be able to see it within a week, as soon as we can get it up. Or if you want to see it after the meeting, I'll be more than happy to show it to you. Happy to answer questions after public comment.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think you've gone pretty good ways to bringing the development to life, even without the video. So thank you for that. All right, so commissioners, do you have any immediate questions? Okay, then we'll open the public comment period. I believe we had sufficiently few people wishing to comment that we will continue to give people 3 minutes. And I would like to invite you to come up. Maybe please form a line so that we're always ready to go with the next person. And when it is your time to speak, I don't think everybody needs to get up right away. When it is your time to speak, right? Let me invite you, but not request that you give us your name and let us know where you live. And then we'll be delighted to hear what you have to say. Is that microphone?
Thank you, Margaret. So the tall people go there, the petite ones go there. Anyway, I'm Grace Garrity, but this was prepared by Shirley Fisher. All of us are Terra Linda residents. Over the last 4 years, Merlin Geyer's proposal for Northgate Mall has greatly improved. It has incorporated many community objectives, including adding lower height for sale townhomes, distributing the lower income units throughout the project, and including a larger town square with natural grass, shade trees, and expanded playground, and separate dog park. Several issues have not been adequately addressed. The traffic study doesn't accurately portray how traffic will increase at this main exit for Terra Linda Valley and how it will impact evacuation routes. San Rafael residents will have to pay for the additional fire and police services and traffic improvements required for this project by the increase of approximately 30,000 people. The next time you see this project, you, the commissioners, you will be asked to certify the final environmental impact report and approve the package for project entitlements. Since the developer won't agree to a development agreement, it is critical that key guarantees be included in the use permit and other project entitlements so that if, or rather when, the property changes ownership in the next decades, the city has protections in place to ensure essential project requirements remain in effect. I advise you to study the permits and development agreements of recent projects such as BioMarin and Loch Lomond. The project entitlements that we believe must be included is a detailed construction management plan, requirements that open space mitigation fees be used for improvements in recreation in facilities near Northgate, specifications of the amount and timing of the project's monetary contribution to completing North San Rafael Promenade along Marydale Road to Smart Station, and guarantees that amenities on the property, such as the town square, the library, community room, remain accessible to the public in perpetuity. I thank you for your attention, and I want to remind you that the permits and entitlements are not determined by state law. So I hope you will all protect, and the city of San Rafael will protect its community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Good evening, everyone. Susan Coleman, longtime resident of Terra Linda and residential realtor. I have just a couple points. I'm speaking on behalf of myself tonight. And I want to thank Merlone Geyer for the improvements and for incorporating so much of the comments back from the community. Good thing we had a design review board during this process because so many of those contributions were key in making the project seem a lot nicer. Nonetheless, the scale and massing is huge. And I'm going to ask one more time for some sort of even very simple scale model so that people can understand what this is going to feel like. I think drone shots or imagery is nice, but it's just not the same. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to have a bunch of materials, but showing relative sizes, I think, would really help the community understand. If it's really not that massive, that'll come out in the scale model. I think that would be a really valuable thing to do. We are not a downtown community. We are a suburban community. This is going to be a huge change. So I think that would be really valuable. Traffic again, one more time, folks, listen. One lane up there on the approach to 101 gets shut. Everything flows happened just 3 weeks ago, all the way back to Scotty's and beyond. And people are diverting to go up through the Lucas Valley area to get onto the freeway. So something's got to be done about traffic. Finally, a quick request. It'd be lovely if we could get local restaurants, local vendors in instead of national brands. We're trying to support our local business people, and that's one way we can do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Hi there. My name is Patricia Warnock, and I've lived in Terra Linda since 1971. I have taught in the schools in Terra Linda. We've raised 2 children there. It's a wonderful community. We elected to stay when we could have moved out several years ago. Okay, soon you are going to be making a decision of major consequence to Terra Linda and to the other citizens who use our community. Yes, this application's been going on since March of 2021, but that is because of the potential negative impact of the project. All the conversations of the developer revolve around what is happening in that 45 acres. I heard not one word about traffic, and traffic is the #1 concern on people's minds because those of us who live in Terra Linda know how impacted our traffic is at certain times of the day and even the evening. I have 2 questions of the Planning Commission, and I don't want to read about some euphemistic thing in the IJ about traffic. What I want to know from this commission, before you guys vote, we the people deserve to know how many cars this project is going to generate. And we should be able to understand in layman's terms how our existing roads and their plans for just not building more roads, but changing patterns of traffic and so forth are going to be able to handle it. This morning, my husband and I returned from Green Bay in a dental appointment. We were on Freitas Parkway at 8:15, as far all the way down that I could see to Monticello and Freitas, bumper to bumper. We've got a big hospital that our community serves. It will grow. We have schools. This will require more people on the roads. We've got the only high school, the second high school in San Rafael is in our community. We're down to 1 public elementary school. There are 2 private elementary schools. Lots of traffic. You cannot vote in favor of this until the traffic issues are corrected. And we have the right to know what's going to happen. We've already relegated ourselves to the fact that if there's wildfire on the western part of our community, that we won't be able to get out. We don't even know what evacuation routes there are. Imagine when you're putting all these apartments in there. And the other thing is, this plan started 25 or 30 years ago when the general plan was that Terra Linda was going to be the focal point for San Rafael. Well, I'll tell you, our society is very different today. And if this goes in and there's that nice big area for people of the public to congregate, we're going to need more than one police car in Terra Linda.
Thank you.
Because that's all we've got now. And this city better be prepared to spend money for policing because we need it. We need it. The real problem is Sacramento and this plan to build in all of our communities. They're not going to be happy until they see all this congestion in communities.
Thank you.
Take a look at the southern part of San Mateo County.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Kirk Warnock, 50-year resident of Terra Linda. And this project, whereas I think the architect did a good job on it, is trying to fit a very large project into a small residential community. We're not a community of 6- and 7-story buildings. Okay. So it's, and, with the hospital and the high school and, 2 elementary schools, it's building a second San Rafael. So I would urge the commission that this whole thing be rejected because it doesn't fit a residential community of 1-story houses. It just doesn't fit it. Fit not only just the environment, but the people and the congestion and all the fumes that are going to be resulting from the traffic. And I think with all of this, the property values are going to drop. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
Hi, I'm Caitlin McShane, and as a housing justice advocate, I'm excited to see this project progressing forward. As a resident in Terra Linda, a parent with 2 kids in the Miller Creek School District, and a school board member, I'm paying very close attention to the impact this project will have on our schools and San Rafael's ability to welcome new students to our community and maintain the high quality education we're committed to providing. The project falls within the Miller Creek School District. We'll need to prepare to welcome approximately 338 additional elementary and middle school students by the end of phase 2. That's roughly the size of one of our elementary schools. This increase in enrollment would exceed the capacity of our existing school facilities, which means we need to plan. So here we are with the Planning Commission. The cost to upgrade facilities will be significant. I'm sure that everyone involved in this project, from the city to the developers, along with our schools, wants to ensure that we can provide excellent schools for every student as our community grows. Very exciting growth. Developer fees would typically be the main way a school district would be able to cover the infrastructure costs to upgrade school facilities. So let's please work together to be ready to welcome new students to our community while maintaining a high quality education we're provided to committing to all. Thanks again for what you're doing here, and thank you for your collaboration as we move this project and our community forward.
Thank you, Caitlin.
My name is Heidi Meyer, and I am a resident of Villa Marin, which is a very attractive, high-density senior living facility which overlooks Northgate. It was built in 1985 and is surrounded by open space, dedicated open space. Early this year, our resident Alan Jones was asked by our board of directors to study the developer's proposal for Northgate and report to them. It became clear that most folks looking at 2-dimensional drawings did not understand what was being proposed, so he decided to build a model, which is being shown to you now. When the model is viewed, the built-in limitations of their proposal are easy to see. 1, most of the site is taken up by roads and drive-up parking structures. There is a town square, but it's impossible to get there without crossing busy streets. Most of the housing is in large blocks with parking in the center. This means that almost all of the housing units are on a narrow street, which might otherwise be called a wind tunnel, or a courtyard, which looks more like what we used to call a light well. If I'm at my 5th floor window, my only view is likely to be of my neighbor's 5th floor window, and that's hardly an attraction. The commercial space is not community oriented. Much of the new commercial space is taken up by an IMAX theater complex and fast food joints, which will add to the outside traffic and congestion, which others have commented on. The townhomes, now being proposed in increased number, resemble nothing more than an army barracks, rows of 3-storied structures separated by driveways or narrow planting strips. This is in the shadow of Quail Hill, a still beautiful and desirable townhome development next to Villa Marin. I don't think it's an exaggeration, frankly, to say that this proposal runs the risk of becoming an urban slum in 10 to 15 years. Let's not let this be the example that proves the short-sightedness of the current state laws that favor the wishes of profit-motivated developers over the needs of local communities like San Rafael. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Heidi.
I'm happy to put the model up there. I just want to make sure that this is a representation. I'll do it, sir. It's merely that this is a representation by this gentleman who's a member of the public. So we haven't peer reviewed it, but I'm happy to put it up so people can see it.
Yep. Hello, my name is Alan Jones. I'm a resident of Villa Marin. As an architect, I could not allow myself to criticize another proposal without verifying that something more beautiful was possible. The model you're now being shown was the result of taking a fresh look at the challenges of providing a high-density mixed-use development on this beautiful site. The scheme is schematic and preliminary, but carefully done to scale as an overlay of the developer's drawings. As an exercise, I have provided for more housing units and more commercial and or community space and more parking than the corresponding Merlone-Geyer proposal. This doesn't mean I personally advocate these densities on this site, but only that their goals can be met with a beautiful and even inspiring scheme. The scheme has been carefully designed to be built in 2 phases corresponding to the proposed phases. This design is based on the following principles, which should be the basis of any development in this location. Get the cars out of sight. All parking is a half level below the surrounding grade, covered with earth fill and planted as a park. Ample room has been provided for up to 4,000 cars, in addition to building service areas, elevators, and stairways. Keep the tall portions of the buildings well away from the surrounding streets and neighborhoods. Buildings shown are up to 9 stories high, but the tall portions are more than 200 feet from the surrounding streets. They step down gracefully. Facet and step the buildings so that long corridors are avoided and neighborhood groupings are formed. Every dwelling unit should have a view of the beautiful surroundings, including the open space below Villa Marin. Surround the buildings with open space so that residents can reach a playground or go shopping without crossing a street. It should truly be an environment where I could spend a week and not get in my car. And 5th, provide commercial space that is easy to access and truly neighborhood serving. The taller portion of the first floor is envisioned as being entirely commercial or community-oriented space easily reached by elevators or stairs from the center of the parking area. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan.
I'm Bruce Baker, and I'm a resident of Villa Marin. A little history. Terra Linda, as has been spoken about so far, is thought of as a neighborhood of single-family residents, largely true, including many, many Eichler homes. And Mr. Eichler, who I knew when I was growing up in San Francisco, was a very prominent architect at that time. The hill above Northgate, however, was developed in the 1980s, and it consists of Quail Hill, a neighborhood townhouse, which steps down nicely on the hillside. And also up there is our Villa Marin, which is a high-density senior living development. Both of these are surrounded by open space. We hear the coyotes at night. We see the hawks flying. We see the turkeys and the coyotes and what have you. And I just wonder if any of that has been brought up in the study of how all of these will be affected with this development at the foot of our hillside. Villa Marin consists of 4 stories, condominiums over a ground floor parking level. It is built along a ridge, something that may not be permitted today if local regulations are not already completely superseded by state mandates. The design, however, is angled and faceted in such a way that one is not aware of it being a large complex. There are open atriums, hallways are faceted, the complex steps down nicely at each end of the building. It blends into the hillside, and most of our units have the most beautiful views. We have balconies and, as I said, stunning views. So we have good examples both of high-density housing and town home development looking down at Northgate site. And I hope the developers will look up at the hillside and follow some of the examples of the neighbors that are up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Good evening. My name is Jan Specht, and I'm from Villa Marin also. I'd like to make a couple of comments about open space. Architecture consists not only of interior spaces for living, working, shopping, learning, and worshiping. It consists as well of all the spaces surrounding the buildings, the spaces that surround all of us as we move from one place to another, the sum total of spaces within which we live. Open space isn't something that can be provided in blocks here and there to meet a certain prescribed quota. Living in an urban environment, we all crave a taste of the contact with nature that we evolved as a species to be nourished by. We need to look out a window to see the rising sun. We need to walk to the bus and pass a few trees. Many of us in a suburban environment, which in spite of the great promise it held in the post-war years when the suburbs boomed, now means that many hours in stalled traffic on the freeway is part of our daily routines. There's a fresh idea in recent years that permitting higher density development in suburban areas could promote vibrant mixed-use communities which might dramatically cut down on the need for freeways and allow us to spend much of our lives without getting into our cars. This idea includes the vision that allowing taller buildings will allow real open space between them. Of course, that only works if you don't put another big box building right next door. Sadly, the developers of the Northgate project have neglected to take that into account. It takes a certain artistry to develop at a higher density and at the same time allow even more light and air and space for living. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Hello, I'm Linda Taberbeck. I'm a new resident of Villa Marin. I want to speak to Alan's, just to be clear, the model on your right is Alan's suggestion. This project that to me looks like the projects is what the developer is proposing. These are Alan's comments, and then I'll add my own. The current proposal is flawed from the beginning in how it chooses to handle cars and parking. Perhaps because of the grouping of housing units into large blocks, the site is crisscrossed with narrow streets to permit access to raised parking structures. In addition, surface parking lots surround the public areas, making pedestrian access dangerous and challenging. While one might argue that raised parking structures cost less than underground parking, this may not be true, as one might assume. All raised structures must meet seismic requirements, making them far from simple structures. In addition, special care must be taken to ventilate interior parking structures and protect the adjacent apartments from carbon monoxide. The half-level down parking with the landscaping above envisioned in this alternative scheme could lend itself to very environmentally responsible construction techniques. Concrete debris created by demolition could be recycled on site for use in new concrete or paving. Soil excavated could be stockpiled and reused to top off the parking level and create a park. Collectors could be installed to catch rainwater, which, together with recycled sewage from Las Galianas, could be used to irrigate the landscape. My personal reaction to this, as a person who's recently moved here from San Francisco, is I've always felt that Marin County had a real value for open space. My understanding was that San Rafael had requirements for minimum open space. This is, I mean, I'm also a retired school teacher, and I'm thinking you've got 1,400 families, which presumably are going to include some kids, and they're going to have one small area to play in and get some kind of connection to the land. I mean, I look at this and I wouldn't have any interest in going there. I look at Allen's and I think, I would like to find a bodega and a picnic table and go there. This is like, to me, a new city park. Now, I'll tell you one thing that residents of Villa Marin do because of our age. We think about our futures and what we're going to leave behind. I think you have an opportunity to create a legacy that is positive and not, I've seen these developments in Southern California and they're just ugly blocks of squares and rectangles. This is something that will bring pride to San Rafael and be appealing and will not turn into a slum in a short period of time.
Thank you.
I understand the difficulties, but please reconsider.
Thank you, Linda.
Good evening. My name's Colin, Terra Linda resident. We're about 3 or 4 blocks from the development. Thank you for having this tonight, and I want to say I appreciate the presentation by the developer tonight. I think it did articulate that at least some, and perhaps many things have been heard, and so I appreciate the design and the changes that are there. There's 3 things that I'd like to request you to perhaps request more clarification on, because I'm unclear. I'm not an expert in this, in design review processes, but have read through as much and everything that we could find, and we've been tracking this. And so the first, I want to reiterate again the concern over traffic. We're a block and a half from that high school, and we have to plan when we come and go based on pick up and drop off. We have our own daughter that needs to get to school, and we literally have to do some jockeying to make sure that we get our child to school in the morning, given the existing traffic, and there are bottlenecks now. So I want to reiterate that concern. The other 2 items that I'm not clear on, and I'm hoping there can be some additional clarification in the environmental impact report, is identified. The young woman brought this up. There's going to be an insertion of another 300, perhaps 400 new kids into elementary and grade school into the 2 school districts. And there was a section in the environmental impact report that called out that the findings were no significant impact. And one of the reasons was, and I might be misunderstanding it, is that new facilities that would have to be built to accommodate the new children would have to undergo their own environmental impact report. As a result, it's not covered by this one, which to me seems that's really kind of kicking the can down the road, if I'm understanding that correctly. So big concern that was identified, and I haven't seen anything that is addressing it. Given plans great internally, but what about the school? The second thing I think that could really use some clarification, where will these people shop? I go to that Safeway, and I can tell you now that there's congestion existing. in the existing plan, again, I might not be understanding, but I don't see anything for a market. All people need to shop, and the nearest one is that Safeway, which, as we know, those of us who live there, it's tight as is. So hopefully we can get some additional clarification on those two aspects. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Colin.
Hi, thank you for having us here tonight and able to speak on this topic. I'm Janine Larea, and I'm a Terra Linda resident. I'm deeply concerned with the city of San Rafael's decision to use inaccurate baselines for the transportation study in the draft environmental report that assumed a fully functioning mall, which Northgate clearly currently is not. This undermines, in my view, the credibility of the DEIR. For example, the transportation impact study's finding that the project would have a quote unquote beneficial impact on emergency response times to me defies logic. The project would add thousands of new residents and their vehicles to a limited road network with few ingress and egress options. Contrary to the study's finding, common sense dictates that such a large population increase for such a small community with a limited, confined road network would cause traffic to increase, probably substantially, and could negatively impact emergency response times and evacuation routes. Clearly, a new transportation study using legitimate, accurate baselines is necessary. Morning peak hour traffic should be further studied to ensure the existing road network has the capacity to handle the amount of additional traffic caused by the development upon full build-out with thousands of new residents, as well as the full build-out's impact on emergency response times, delays, and evacuation routes. Members of the public have also called into question other areas of the DEIR. How can we have confidence in it when it includes such obvious flaws? To be clear, I support a reasonable, responsible residential development at Northgate Mall. However, as members of the Design Review Board stated, the project is just too big. Let's not kid ourselves. This would be a mini metropolis, totally out of character with our quiet, bucolic nature of our community, and which likely would overwhelm our existing infrastructure. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny.
Trying to make it lower. Height issues. Good evening. My name is Judith Bloomberg. I'm a resident of San Rafael for over 36 years. I'm a leader in the Marin Organizing Committee, and I'm a congregant at Congregation Road of Shalom, which is here in Terra Linda. I want to commend Merlin Geyer for their outreach to the community. I feel that they've been very, very responsive in terms of trying to listen to what the community and residents think. We need affordable housing. We are mandated by the state of California to produce a certain amount of affordable housing. My two children, who are adults in their late 30s, cannot live here. My daughter is a preschool teacher. She cannot afford to rent here. I recently looked at what qualifies as low income for Marin County, between $109,700, that's for one individual, up to $206,000 plus is considered low income. We are very concerned here in Marin not to be segregated, not to live in white bubbles. And yet, everything we are doing here is to keep other people of color out. Thousands and thousands of the people who work in our county, the people who do healthcare, the people who care for our elderly, are commuting every day, hours and hours into this county to work. They're not going to San Francisco. They are working in Marin. So I really want to see this development done. It's going to take years and years to see a completed project. And we need a diverse community here, families to live here, people of color to live here, our workforce to live here. So I sincerely hope that we move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.
I'm Pat McKenna. I moved into Marin County in 1998. I have 5 children. 3 of them grew up here. 2 of them are already outside the county. They went to Bakersfield. 1 went to Roanoke Park. 1 fortunately found a site in Santa Benicia area. 1's on the couch coming back from home. The other one is looking for a place. So I rode the bus to San Francisco for almost 30 years. So I know the things that exist here that move people. And we need mass transit. We need local transit. I went to a meeting, and I don't go to the meetings very often, but I went to a Golden Gate board meeting, and none of the people on that board ever rode any of the buses. And to me, that's a criteria. I would like to see the people that do this, businesses, the government, you really need to up your game because the business certainly has. His drawings is excellent. He really has a plan. And I don't know if it's a great plan or not, but one thing I'd like to contribute to it, if I can, would be the biggest crisis we had was the drought. And it almost wiped us out. And it's going to happen again. And I'm happy to hear about purple pipes, permeable ground surfaces. I don't know what they're going to do with all that, but they really need to go state of the art. And if we go state of the art with a lot of things, it may cost more, but it's going to be worth it to have people come here and copy it. And I hope that you will accept the responsibility that you've put on your shoulders, because it's a huge thing to do. And it's needed everywhere, not just here, but all around, everywhere you look. Affordable housing is just housing and everybody needs it. You know, it's not like daycare. Yeah, you need everything. And it's got a horrible expense and time and money and expertise. And that's what I hope you do is, I'm from an HR background, build your HR so you get more people, more departments that look at this and hold everybody's feet to the fire, including the public. Thank you for having this. It's really informative for me to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Good evening. I'm Bill Carney. I'm Vice President of Sustainable San Rafael. And I want to lead off just by saying, please, in your guidance tonight, make sure that there is no further reduction of affordable workplace housing. Our main concern, our main request is that the revised project eliminate the use of natural gas in the small number of commercial restaurants. According to the DEIR, by complying with air districts and state standards, this single straightforward step would remove both the greenhouse gas impacts that the report has deemed to be unavoidable. It appears to be the only way to meet the state's goals. With non-polluting induction cooking now used in many restaurants, and preferred by many chefs for its precision control of heat. The developer's statement that this superior cooking technology is infeasible is not a legitimate basis for the project's failure to mitigate this significant greenhouse gas impact. Without this change, the city will be forced to make a finding of overriding consideration. That is a finding that there's something more important than reducing climate change. Or in this case, the city would have to find that the desire of a few restaurants to cook with gas overrides the importance overrides the imperative that we stop burning fossil fuels in order to curb climate change. I don't think any of us would agree with that finding. And so please join us in requesting induction cooking as a feasible mitigation. I think overall, this project can become a model of neighborhood vitality and climate responsible development. But let's get this finding correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, My name is Julie Harwood Case. My family has lived in Terra Linda since 1958. Lots of history, know a lot about it. I told you all before in the morning earlier, I know too much for my own good. Last time I broached a subject, you were all invited to my house at one point to come and have some coffee and walk around. I now invite you to come by my house. I'm on Nova Albion, right up from the Northgate Mall. Been in that house since 1972. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody and that y'all did do a little bit better than I had seen before. So I'm encouraged. But what I would like to say is I will bring up one idea that some people have mentioned, and I will bring it up. 1 week ago today, I tried to leave from my house, which is right at the 5 houses up from the Northgate Mall, at about 6:15 to make an appointment at 7 o'clock at Strawberry. And I have to tell you, if you remember what happened last week, on Tuesday, there was a lot of traffic because there was a big rig and some tires that were blown out and a variety of other subsequent situations. It's just one example, but I'm being specific and bringing up one example of a situation. I aborted my mission. However, I did try to go over Los Ranchitos and I got to Lincoln Avenue and I went all the way up to the top and veered around. And I aborted my mission because I wasn't going to get to my appointment on time and I called and canceled. But that was just a minor problem. But as stated with everybody else, I want to say that it is really a very important thing to consider. This traffic situation is not going away. And I have to tell you, I brought up last time and in February, you might have remembered, I mentioned the brum brums of the cars from Terra Linda High School and the environmental impact and all of that. Still an issue, but I'm going to really bring up the traffic part of it now because emergency services, if there is a fire, absolutely without a doubt. I have a hill behind me. I am preparing. I have defensible space, but darn if I can't do it, I can't take all the responsibility. I hope that you will take my invitation up sometime and come and see me. I just want you to know I can speak to every subject that has been brought up, whether it has to be affordable housing or the schools, because I went through the Dixie School District and I'm grateful. I love Terra Linda. I love where I live, but I don't think we can handle all that traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Good evening. My name is Kate Powers. I'm a resident of Terra Linda. I appreciate the changes that Merlone Geyer has done, and I appreciate the participation in the process and the opportunity to comment many times on the project. I do have a couple of questions. The first is, and I just wanted to mention that I agree with and appreciate Shirley Fisher's and Grace Garrity's comments. I was wondering, in relation to that, could you explain to the public during this hearing why there will not be development agreements between Merlone Geyer and the city? And I understand development agreements not only document the development rights of the project, but also the public benefits of the project in addressing the community's needs, including addressing traffic. And they also define the ways the project will be implemented and are kind of an enforcement of the developer's promises. I think that one thing that hasn't been, that is incumbent upon the Planning Commission is that you need to look at the community vision and how the different projects add up to providing us with the vision of Terra Linda. I'm wondering if if there will be any future opportunities for the public to review the merits of the project and the use permits that will be given to the applicant. I also just wanted to mention that I also agree that I'm looking forward to the opportunity to comment on how the comments are addressed in the DEIR. I think that the traffic baselines and trip generations were not handled correctly. I'm also wondering how the nighttime glare and light will be treated on this site. And it wasn't clear to me whether the masonry on the tall buildings will be concrete slab or some other treatment. I agree with Sustainable San Rafael's comments, and I appreciate the bicycle and pedestrian improvements. My last comment is that I would really like to see the developer work with planners at Marin Transit to prioritize public transit to and from the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Hello, I'm Paul Gashora. I live about 1.1 miles away from the proposed project, closer to Lucas Valley Road. As a result, I avoid the intersection of Freitas Parkway and 101 and instead go on Lucas Valley Road. It's always faster, except for the rare cases when 101 is backed up. So one observation is, if there are 1,422 units, there needs to be a lot more parking. On average, I think you can expect 1.5 to 2 cars per one bedroom apartment. And for larger apartments, I think you can expect 1 car per bedroom. So if there are 1,422 units, and presumably those are more than 1 bedroom, there needs to be a lot of cars. That either means that the existing structure has to be increased so that it approaches 6 stories as some of the other buildings, or the parking has to be put underground. Either one would be adequate in my mind. The other thing is too, as part of the environmental impact report, I think there needs to be an evacuation study with concrete proposals of how those people are going to leave. Because if the people are in their apartments and they have to move over to their cars, they're not going to be able to get out of there in time. Now, maybe people think that everyone will just walk out Marydale Road or exit some other mechanism, but it is realistic to assume that people will have to evacuate because of fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening. My name is Faris Hamza. I'm a former resident of the Bret Harte neighborhood. I'm currently living in Los Angeles. However, I'm coming back to the area to provide comment for this. As someone who was born and raised in San Rafael, I would love to come and move back here. But the affordability, as stated by some of the previous speakers here, it's just not possible for me. You know, I come from an engineering background, so I can afford homes outside of the area, but I would love to return to my place of birth, my original hometown. On top of that, I do want to make echo some comments on sustainable San Rafael, as well as a previous speaker on local markets or a grocery store within the area, as just reducing the overall traffic impacts by having localized services within the area would be beneficial. On top of that, just a personal comment, with regards to grid reliability or power reliability, I understand with issues around PG&E, I know they're trying to address it across the state right now in Northern California, but just for looking into the idea or concept of microgrids or something that can be more localized to the community so that there is sort of a sustainable or reliable resource if there ever is a larger grid blackout or power failure in the area would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ferris.
Hello, I'm Mark Kerner. I'm a Terra Linda resident. I live fairly close to Northgate Mall on Nova Albion, so close to the school as well. I'd just like to reflect what other comments have been. I don't think I have to go into it too much. I do think traffic's going to be an issue there, especially during certain hours going in and out of the schools. It's a real problem. I'd like to see, like, I don't know how to do this, but if there's some way for this development and the city to work together along with the schools to figure out what that is. I mean, the hard part of these developments, they kind of happen in isolation. They have their area that they're working in, and it doesn't take into account everything else around it. I know they're trying to think about it, but I think some other things need to be built as well. Not only will the middle schools be affected, but ultimately in the long run, Terra Linda is going to be getting more students as well. We're building things now in that school, but that will also need to continue to expand. The other part is I think it'd be super helpful to understand what stores are going in. I think that that's a big part of, like, this could be amazing if is walkable grocery store. They're like knowing what those are. I think there's a lot of confusion and concern from the community because is it just going to be more fast foods coming in? Those types of amenities would make more walkable. Cars would become less of an issue. I do like the idea of more parks. I understand that there's costs that are involved with it, but I'll leave it at that. Those are my comments tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
My name is Lori, and I live a block from the mall. And I love this design. I've been grieving the loss of the open space. The mall was designed with space around it, space around the buildings. Even the parking lots are a place to rest your eye. And to have buildings up to the road is really upsetting that we're going to lose that space. All kinds of wildlife use that space to move from area to area. There was a good question about the light impact, all the impacts on nature. The traffic is huge. It already backs up all the time. I wish they could find a way to do a beautiful design where people feel comfortable coming from, and that it's more of a community space. This is not a community space. The center thing, I can't imagine wanting to go over through all this density to go see it. You know, it just seems like it's stuck in there. I feel like the open space that should be included in this project, they're going to give money to improve already existing parks without adding more open space for the added people. When they moved here, they had limits on height. They knew that those limits. There were density rules and all of that. And it just seems like a greedy grab with high density housing that's not even thoughtfully designed to be beautiful. I know you think it is, but look how much more beautiful this is. Why couldn't you do something like that? It reminds me of some buildings in Brazil where they have plants hanging off the sides. It's very much like this. And this creates a space where people want to go and that it's part of the community. And if you're going to put in that many people, at least make it beautiful and part of the community. This is not part of the community. And we don't need a city plopped in the middle of our beautiful little neighborhood. You know, we don't need another city. This is not the downtown. We don't want a downtown where we live. You know, we live where we live because it's beautiful in nature and should not be. I'm grieving the loss of you know, the neighborhood for years now. Yeah, I'd rather have the 9 stories than the 6 and 7 stories and create, you know, a beautiful space.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Hi, good evening. I'm Geraldine Hubert. I've been living in Terra Linda for 10 years now. I just wanted to point out that design doesn't look very modern to me. There is no talk about solar. There is no talk about recycling water, which are a big problem for the community. The parking lot is huge. There is not even a solar panel in there. It doesn't look like it's been considered to have modern technologies. Like it will be a lot of sun at that place. What kind of material do they use for the construction? Do they plan to have some efficiency in the materials that they are using, so we don't need so much AC and so much electricity? And that design, if you go to, I don't know, like Squaw Valley, you have the same kind of buildings, 5, 6 stories. It's not original. We have that everywhere, and people will be just piled up here. And I don't think it's a really good idea. And I don't even talk about the schools that are not designed to accept 300 more kids. It hasn't been taken into account, or the hospital, or the or just the cemetery? Where will you put all those people? At one point, we will have to answer those questions. There is no public transportation really designed. So it's not a building from the 21st century. It's a building from the 20th century, and we can do better, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And Margaret, was there?
Chair, and then we do have one person that we wanted to bring on to provide testimony.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Pamela Reeves, and I'm here on behalf of Marin Conservation League. And I appreciate the time to speak, and I especially appreciate all the hard work people went to allow me to comment via Zoom. I think that the project, we at MCL think that the project has improved quite a bit, and would like to agree with what Sustainable San Rafael said, and I won't repeat those things. They're very, very important. And I'm very pleased that we have some affordable housing. We don't have enough. But what I'd like to point out is there seems to be an error in the staff report. I hope it's an error, but if you look at page 30 or page 27 of the staff report about the EV charging availability in the various parcels, parcel 1 and 2 are the townhomes. They will be have EV charging or be EV ready for 28% and 21%, whereas every other building will be EV ready or have EV charging for 100%. So that must be an error that the townhomes are being left out to be EV ready. So I would hope that that can get clarified. We'd also like to have clarified that there will be no gas fire pits, either on rooftops or near restaurants. No gas powered any heating elements. Just have that clarified that that will not be the case. And then now that I notice that there's one lane being removed, it seems like that will cause more idling. The level of service for the DEIR that was studied, that's a requirement, not of CEQA, but it's a requirement of the city of San Rafael, and it was done. That can now not be accurate because the lane will be eliminated. And so I don't know what you all do about that, but that will create a lot more greenhouse gas emissions with idling. And so those are my comments, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
Affordable, everyone thinks it's affordable housing. I'd like them to state the rents that they're charging so people can see that it's not affordable.
Okay, thank you. If there is nobody else who would like to speak tonight, I will now close the public hearing comment period for this evening. And commissioners, if there are questions that either you have or you've heard this evening, we'll go ahead and take those questions now. Sure.
Yeah, thank you everybody for their comments. I just have a couple of clarification questions. So is each unit hooked up to recyclable water? So each unit will be using recyclable water?
The short answer is yes, because they're dual plumbed. Okay. So all of the residential has dual plumbing. Recycled for the non-potable, non-drinking part is recyclable, but the drinking part is fresh.
Okay.
Potable, or drinking water. That makes sense?
Okay, thank you. And what about solar panels? Are solar panels being considered for any of the residents?
Solar panels are being considered for all the residential. What we don't have detail, because the construction drawings haven't even started, we don't know what space of, but actual space is available on the roof for the solar panels. Solar panels will be on all the multifamily buildings. We just don't know how many, because it'll be based on how much room there is once you take up room for all the other mechanical and venting systems that are on there. But they will have solar panels.
Great, thank you. And then I was looking at your drawings, and on residential 1 at the townhomes, but specifically residential 1, on the roof plan, there's the open personal space in several of the units, but I don't see where all of the units are included. And I'm just wondering, the units that don't have rooftop open space, is there open space if it's not designated? Like a balcony, or what is that?
So there's also ground floor. So
Yeah.
because all of the units have a ground floor entrance, there's open space on the ground plane as well. So like a patio by the front door or a place to barbecue. So there's open space. What some have balconies on the second level, some on the top, but others their open spaces on the ground plane.
Okay. So
But all
unit will
units
it.
have their required open space.
Okay, great, thank you. And I guess my last question is about the fast food restaurants. And is it a prerequisite in order to get a fast food restaurant to have drive-through, or is drive-through necessary because of the traffic?
We think drive-throughs are a welcome addition to the product to allow that kind of use to come here. They're not there now, but we think there's a high demand for that. Brings people to the center. We have not contacted or entered any kind of lease negotiations with any of those tenants. Based on the quality of the project and based on the tenants that we're dealing with in a project like this, these are higher end tenants. We're not talking, and I'll just throw out some names. We're not talking about Burger King and Del Taco and, Ibiertos or something like that. These are high end that you might have an In-N-Out or a Raising Cane's or a Chick-fil-A. And I don't mean to press, some people like, some others don't. But we feel the need is there. There's a lot of people. I personally don't go to drive-throughs, but I also know a lot of families. Kids are home from soccer practice. They need to stop and grab a bite to eat. Someone's grabbing a cup of coffee on the way to work. So they're a convenience for the people in the community, and there's a strong need for that use at the center. So that's why we're allowing for that use in our zoning.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for everybody's work on this. And many pages of hard work that I appreciate, and knowing that the community's had a chance to weigh in and ask questions and have those sessions, I think is really valuable and important to make sure that this project reflects the needs of the residents in San Rafael. I had a couple questions, and I mean, some of like the development agreement question, I think that might be a longer answer, so we don't need, and it's probably a question for all of us, so I think we can answer that. We don't have to answer that now, but why that was withdrawn. And then is the narrower Northgate Drive taken into consideration the DIR? I believe that change happened prior to the DIR, but I just wanted to check. Yeah.
If you'd like to stay at the podium.
I misspoke earlier. We're not reducing a travel lane. Well, we're reducing the width of a travel lane, but it's parking along Northgate Drive along that side.
Got it. It's when you had the presentation, it sounded like you were reducing a lane. So
that's what I said, and I misspoke. So I
okay.
apologize.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. Okay, great. And then the other question, I know that traffic's a huge issue.
Yes.
There's traffic around the site. A lot of it involves Caltrans, which dictates all of freeway on-ramps and off-ramps and all of, basically the pressure that the need for housing is putting on California, and then also the city of San Rafael. So this might be a question for Micah or for Margaret, but really just kind of giving a high-level overview of how the city is working to address, the concerns. Our community was built a long time ago, and the population was a lot smaller. There is a need for these units. There's a need for people to be living densely so that we're living sustainably and that we're allowing people to affordably live, and that we protect our open space. So I think that given all those things, we're just densifying some of all these concerns get amplified in one space. So be good to hear about that. And that's all I had.
Michael, were you going to address that?
I guess that's my question. Would you like it addressed now, or do you want me to take a list? How would you like?
I don't mind if we want to just get all our comments and then you can go down the list. Yeah, I don't need to have it addressed now. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I had some of the same questions, so I won't repeat them. The additional questions I have are, Mr. Geiser, was there a wind study done? Sorry, did any of your consultants?
We did shade studies, but I don't believe there was an actual wind study done. I'd have to double check that, but I don't believe that.
Okay. And was there a study or some sort of plan for an emergency evacuation?
I don't think so. I'd have to, the traffic study was voluminous. I haven't read it I didn't see it in there. I don't know what I have to imagine at some point something was discussed, but I can't stand here and tell you today whether that was done. We'll certainly find out. I would imagine that our next meeting, we're going to have a robust discussion about traffic. So we'll make sure to bring answers if we did already have them.
Another one is just about the lighting study. I think there was a lighting study.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We did a complete photometric plan as part of our submittal. And as far as there's requirements for a glare abatement for dark sky requirements, et cetera. And our project complies with all of that.
Yeah, I remember that part. Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to confirm. Let's see here. What other question I have? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on some of those questions or recommendations about the guarantees for associated with like a detailed construction management plan, open space fees, amount and timing of like a promenade to the smart train and things like that?
Our assumption is that all that will be addressed in conditions of approval that we don't have yet.
Yeah.
But we assume that that's where those are going to be addressed.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for the city. Like when do those sorts of requests or negotiations begin, or have they begun already?
So one of the first key items is actually publication of the response to comments on the FEIR. And a lot of the detailed questions that are being asked by the public tonight, they'll all be addressed within that. There's multiple comments provided. That's why it's taken a long time to respond to. So waiting for that to be published at that point, then the planning commission can weigh on those along with the council and the rest of the community, see if those were fully addressed or not. But that's really the starting position for us. And then from that standpoint, then we can formulate the recommendations once we've analyzed or understand that, yes, the impacts are addressed for CEQA, then we'll formulate really the approach, at least a staff position on our recommendation. So that's why we're waiting for that to be finalized and published. And at that point, we'll bring forth that likely the next planning commission hearing those recommendations from staff.
I see. Okay. And perhaps a related question, is there a way to incentivize local businesses and specific businesses like a market?
It's always a struggle. I mean, it's from put my economic development hat on in terms of selecting or specifying a certain tenant that they have to be local. There really is no ability in terms of a city to require that. Also for developers to set aside that, it's actually challenging. I actually know there's a preference though to actually bring in local markets and really a mixture of tenants. And I do believe that's what Merlone Geyer has always targeted, is really a mixture of tenants. So I do anticipate that there will be local businesses, and there are there today. But then as it goes on and if a project is approved, then I do believe there'll be a mixture of tenants. Grocery is always hard. And that's one thing that we always evaluate in terms of opportunities for grocery. It's a really tough market in industry. Safeway is in close proximity, so it does make the ability for other groceries of that nature to compete a little harder. It's also the space availability, and that's the difference when we look at re-tenanting the Northgate Mall or the opportunity for this proposal. There will be some potential tenant opportunities for grocery, but that's to be determined because there's not an entitled project to actually bring in tenants. And I'll let the applicant speak to that in terms of their tenanting approach. But the key thing for them to actually attract tenants is to have an entitled project to say it is moving forward and a timetable for that to happen.
Okay. And then my last question is about emergency response. Could you briefly describe the process where that confirms that there's sufficient emergency responders for a given population and location?
Yes, this actually is something that the city is undertaking citywide. We've had a study, it's a lot of date, but actually the fire department actually has been working on this scope for some time. We have a draft analysis. We're about ready to finalize it. We did analyze Northgate specifically for this project to address this the particular question because it has been raised in terms of the service adequacy for this project and for San Rafael. Now, this is an issue that I think that is focused citywide and we'll have to address over time because as we continue to add households and we have a lot potentially in the pipeline or in the entitlement phases, the capacity in order to provide those services, it will start to be questioned. Now, we have to recall too, we did do, this is all associated with our general plan. We analyzed this growth in our general plan update, anticipated this type of development, and it really is now getting the detail of what this development is. So actually kind of determining that we can accommodate all infrastructure, including public health and safety, along with water, sewer, the things and traffic and things that we're calling out now. So there are a build upon approach of all the studies being presented here, but this also adopts some of the policy and goals and objectives that the council approved. So that's the other factor that we look at, particularly for the mall, which actually had identified this as a housing opportunity site.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. For myself, I think I'd like to invite Marlon Geyer to come up and address. There are three things in particular. You've already talked a little bit about light. If you want to talk just a little bit more about that, that might be helpful. And stores, what is your tenanting approach? I know it's early and it's difficult, but I thought you could shed a little light on what that process might look like and the EV readiness.
Okay, I'll start with what I know most, tenanting. And retail tenants. Our leasing team is talking to both local and national tenants. We have both local and national tenants at the mall today. We anticipate having local and national tenants as we move forward. And we have been talking to local markets in terms of the viability, who's expanding, who might be interested. We've gotten some leads from economic development. And as Michael knows, we have been reaching out and talking to those people. And it's really, we need certainty of entitlement. We need certainty of schedule. And so once we have that, we can then start those talks in earnest. That's also what's been somewhat slowing up our discussions with some of the tenants we need to relocate, like Home Goods, and talking with the theater about remodeling. Those discussions are hard to talk about when we don't have certainty of entitlement and schedule. So those will pick up, assuming that we do get entitled here, those discussions will accelerate. But again, targeting local, we always target local tenants and who's doing great in town and who's expanding. And the city is a great resource. Economic development is a great resource. Chamber of Commerce is a great resource. And we're involved in all those groups and talking to all those people about those exact type of tenants. And in fact, recently, Mi Pueblo was a local find for wanting to expand and come to the mall. So those type of things we're definitely engaged in. Light, we have commissioned a photometric study for the light that's being cast by all of the buildings, not only the site lighting, the pedestrian lighting, the lights come off the building, that they don't exceed maximum levels of foot candles, and there's adequate lighting at all locations, but that all of the light fixtures indeed have all of the proper glare shielding to keep the dark sky up, to meet those provisions at all. So it's something we've worked with staff and modified plans and with our photometric consultant, modify the plans to meet those standards. And so we are. And we'll certainly be changing out not only in the new parking lots, change out lighting, but also change out, I think we actually have already changed out heads out there to go to the low voltage and with the required light shielding. I'd have to double check whether that's completely done or not, but part of that's being built into some of our remodeling, such as the parking structure lighting. We'll have to get changed probably with the remodel of that parking structure. And your last question was EV charging. So for the retail parking, we're meeting the tier 2 standards for the number of retail for the new stalls for all the new stalls, we're reaching tier 2 in terms of providing the number of EV and the type and the number of those stalls. All of the residential, by the way, I'll just answer this. Our residential parking rates are 1.78 per unit, which takes into account the studios, the 1 bedroom, the 2 bedroom. So and that's per city code. So we do provide enough parking, and also there's like 40 or 50 guest parking stalls in each one of these multifamilies, for the guest parking. So there's plenty of parking for the residents there. It has to be, it's market driven. So if there's not enough parking, the tenants, people don't want to live there. But as far as the EV parking for the multifamily units, we're parking per the green building standards, whatever the requirements are in terms of we have to provide so many EV ready. In other words, the chargers are in, and so many EV ready stalls so there's EV charging installed and EV ready. We have to size all of our electrical rooms to provide the additional equipment. We've got to size conduit. We've got to size battery backup. All that's sized per the code, per the green build, per the green California green standards. That's incorporated into our project.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm personally pulling for an Andy's up there.
Andy's.
Do any of the other commissioners have any further questions? No.
I think, I had a follow-up question for Micah. When we were talking about evacuation, I know the fire department's looked at the project and Marine Waters looked at it. Does the fire department look at evacuation, or do they just look at response? Because I think those are two different things, right? There's getting help and then getting out.
Well,
yeah.
This issue's been brought up in both the EIR questions and multiple times for the community. So instead of me trying to fumble through what that is, I'd actually probably bring in the fire chief or the fire department representative to address really the question about evacuation. I just want to make sure there's clarity to understand how our community is prepared for this. And this is not a unique issue to Northgate, as we know. This is an issue really for our community at large, particularly our hillside properties and homes.
Yeah.
And one just understanding really, how do we get out in a case of an emergency? So, and I think that's been called out. So I probably defer. We'll bring that forward at the next planning commission.
Okay,
for the
great.
response of how that is.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I guess just before we move on, were you going to talk any more about a traffic study or traffic management plan or a city level effort for that?
I think maybe I'll turn it to our team if they want to address anything on that in terms of maybe Heather from M Group. They did the analysis in terms of our policy pieces and have been working with our Department of Public Works. If there's anything you want to call out specifically on that. If not, I'll have Margaret chime in on that too.
I don't have anything specific on that, Micah. You're right that Public Works has been a part of the project review throughout and is drafting conditions for anything that we need to make sure is covered with the entitlement package. I understood the commissioner's question to be a little more on a citywide basis with looking at traffic, or specific to the Northgate project.
Yeah, specific to Terra Linda and relative to this project, understanding the sort of area-wide impact in Terra Linda. But I think I'm sorry if I said citywide, I meant at the city's level, like by the city, for instance, the traffic department, Public Works.
So Public Works has been involved in that, and then obviously it has been studied as part of the environmental impact report, and any questions or clarifications through that final EIR is what I would hesitate to say, go into too much detail until we have that document released on anything there. So that's all I have to add to that at this time, Micah.
Okay, thank you.
Does city staff have anything in particular to add to anything that's been said?
I don't mind calling out really the response on the DA. I think that's really a basic. It was part of the applicant's original proposal that we entered a development agreement. We worked with the applicant trying to negotiate those terms. Various reasons came about in terms of really what made sense for the developer to move forward on. They withdrew the DA application. So what they haven't said is, and this is per their development application ability, is to put what's forth, put the application that is in front of you or been highlighted by Heather in terms of the applications. It's not required to have a development agreement. It's an optional permit request and it's really a negotiated component. If they're both mutual agreements that come to terms, then that's what we move forward on. In this case, that didn't come throughout. Most cities and most applications we deal with are not development agreements. It's a rare occurrence. I think we've done like one, and it's Mile Marin. And that's pretty much what I know of recent development agreements. So,
Okay, thank you, Micah. All right, then that concludes this item this evening. I want to thank all of you for coming and devoting your time to helping us better understand the concerns of the community. Yeah, so that concludes this item for tonight. Thank you. And thank you to the developers as well for coming and making your presentation.
through the chair, maybe we take maybe a 5-minute break before.
Let's
we
take
come
a
back on
5-minute
board.
break.
Yeah.
Yep. For me?
Margaret Kavanaugh Lynch, Planning Manager here in San Rafael. This is a short item. I did not prepare a PowerPoint. I think it's very text-based, and I didn't want to make it longer than it needed to be, but we are available to answer questions, and there are people in the audience that are available to answer questions as well. So as a quick overview, the City of San Rafael is requesting that the Planning Commission consider an amendment to the Downtown Precise Plan. The extent of the amendment is, as the chair just said, to remove any and all references that designate 1030 3rd Street as a historical resource. Based on a peer-reviewed historic resource evaluation that was included in your packets as Exhibit 2, it has been determined that the project does not qualify as an historic resource under the California Environmental Quality Act, and therefore the Downtown Precise Plan and supporting documents should be updated to reflect that fact. In your packet, there was a 40-page staff report, including attachments that discuss this. Basically, when we created the Downtown Precise Plan as part of the charge, there was an historic evaluation chapter 5 that was created, and there's an entire website dedicated to the work of that aspect of the Precise Plan. It was brought to the city's attention that 1030 3rd Street really did not rise to the level of historic resource, and folks reached out to the city and asked how one would revisit that discussion. So there is a state code section that's referenced in the report that explains basically it is a resource because it's in a local register or a local list and state list, unless there's a preponderance of evidence, that's the legal term, that would basically shed additional light on the quality of the building and grounds present at 1030 3rd. A historic resource evaluation was prepared. That's the Exhibit 2 by somebody. Excuse me, I brought water this time. I'm working on that. Was created by a person with the credentials established by the Department of Interior. It's actually a national set of standards that you have to qualify to have a professional expertise that you can write a historic resource evaluation to talk about historic resources. Mr. Holbert was identified. He wrote a report. We are very fortunate to have a planner on staff who also has those qualifications, so we could peer review that report. We found that that report was valid. So we want to go through the Downtown Precise Plan, and in your staff report, I think, but it is worth mentioning specifically, there's 2 figures in Chapter 5 that need to be identified and revised. Figure 5.6 on page 111 and figure 5.10 on page 115. In addition, there is a supporting document to the Downtown Precise Plan, Downtown's Historic Resource Inventory Summary Report. There's 2 tables and a fact sheet included in detail in your report, but also included in that document that call this address out as a historic resource. Each of these references will be amended to clarify that this project is not a historic resource based on this evaluation. We will update the Precise Plan to remove those. It's the way the legend shows it, it notes it as a historic resource. We will update those maps and we will strike the references in the summary report and remove the fact sheet. So those are very specific, concrete things that what staff is recommending we do based on this new information. The Planning Commission has 3 options. One is to recommend approval of the amendment of the Downtown Precise Plan to the City Council based on the facts in the report and in the draft resolution. 2, continue the project and request staff to bring back specific information that the Planning Commission would need in order to make a recommendation to the City Council on this topic. Or 3, the Planning Commission can deny the project and direct staff to come back with a draft resolution for denial. This concludes my very brief overview, but like I said, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. I will now open the meeting to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period and ask if any of the commissioners have any questions. No questions, and I have no questions. Then I will invite a motion.
I make it the motion to approve the first option. And I don't recall all the detail of that option. So how would I go about?
Margaret, can you please reread the first option?
First option is basically pardon me. The first option was to make a motion to recommend to the city council that the city of San Rafael modify the downtown Pacific precise plan and supporting documents to reflect that 1033rd Street is not a historic resource.
Okay, I will make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Margaret, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Previtali?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodby?
Aye.
Commissioner Sade?
Aye.
Chair Haveman?
Aye.
Motion passes with 2 abstentions due to absence.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Okay, next we'll move on to the director's report.
I'll be brief, given our long agenda tonight. Just a staffing update. I want to let you know that we've actually backfilled a position that I've been looking to hire for some time, which is a backfill for myself in terms of the economic development function. So we did bring an assistant community and economic development director on board. His name is Greg Miner. He's coming from the city of Oakland. His first day will be at the end of October. So excited to bring him on board. A lot of different skill sets and pieces, kind of adding to the city's teams and expertise. As I said, continue to build the team. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Micah. Do any of the commission members have any communication?
I have just 2 short ones. One, I did meet with Ross last week, and he gave me an update on the Northgate plan. It was a very short meeting. And then secondly, I work for the world's largest metal recycler, and we had the contract in 9/11 to clear out the World Trade Center. And with that, one of the ex-president of our country brought 10 beams with him to the West Coast. And I've been working with various communities to donate the beams to the cities or to the fire departments and do memorials for first responders. And I'm proud to say that I went to the 9/11 ceremony in my district, District 1, and we were able to provide them with a World Trade Center beam for the, and they're going to do a whole thing on it. But I was very happy about that.
Oh, very good. Thank you for sharing that. Any other communications? If there are no other communications, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.